In this demo, I want to get into one of the main data types that we're going to deal with in JavaScript, and that being JSON data. I say one of the main data types because in JavaScript applications, we're going to be exchanging data across different server-side platforms. So our server-side platform might be Java, it might be .NET, it might be PHP or Ruby or Python or Perl or whatever. And our JavaScript application can't communicate with those systems directly, meaning I can't take a Java class and bring it into JavaScript, or I can't take a .NET class and bring it into JavaScript. So what I need to do is I need to run it through a process that's going to allow me to translate my Java class objects or my .NET class objects into something that JavaScript can read, and that process is called serialization. And the main types of serialization that we're going to deal with in JavaScript are JSON serialization and XML serialization. So the first data type that I want to deal with in JavaScript here is JSON data. So I'm going to start with an empty HTML shell. So here's my HTML shell, and we're talking about JSON data. And I'm going to have a reference to an external JavaScript file. So here's my script source, json.js, where we're going to be working with some JSON data. And in the past, we've always kicked off any of our JavaScript code using the init method. And I want to continue to use the init method, but I want to take it a step further now, and I want to move that init method into my external JavaScript file, json.js. So I'm going to go ahead and save this on my desktop in a new folder called JSON, and we'll save this file as index.html. And I want to resize this sidebar a little bit, and I'll create my JavaScript file. And in this JavaScript file, I know that I want to trigger an init method still, so I want some code to execute right after my Java or my HTML page loads. And the way I'm going to have that happen is I'm going to use the window.onload event, and it's going to be equal to init. And then the trick with this is I have to have the init method defined before I actually set up that event handler. So I'm going to have my init method. It's going to be equal to a function definition that gets triggered on the onload, and we'll be able to see that. So if we just want to make sure things are wired up correctly, here I'm just going to log to the console this init method. Okay, so I'm going to skip over to my HTML file, and I want to view that in my browser. So here it is. I'm going to inspect it, and if I look down in my console, we should see that init method. So we're triggering our init method, life's good. Things are wired up correctly. We moved the JavaScript out of our HTML, which is a good thing. Okay, so then we want to start dealing with some JSON data. And before we deal with any JSON data, what I want to talk about is just the basic syntax rules of JSON. Okay, so here's my basic JSON syntax rules. And the first being, so let's just put comments here for the time being. So we want to talk about the rules. The square brackets are going to indicate some kind of collection. And I say a collection, so most people would associate the square brackets with an array. I don't like to use the term array in JavaScript because JavaScript collections are a little bit different than arrays. And what I mean by that is typical arrays are sequential and numerical indexes. So I could say at index 0, at index 1, at index 2. With JavaScript collections, you have that concept, but you also have the concept of having key value pairs in your collection, and you can actually have a mix and match of those. So I could say at index 0 is the value first name, and then at index first name is the value Bill. Okay, so collections in JavaScript are kind of strange, but regardless of that, square brackets indicate some kind of collection of items, whether it be numbers or strings or objects or whatever. It's a collection. Okay, so that's the first rule that we care about in JSON. The second rule that we care about in JSON is that if we have beginning and ending curly braces, we're talking about an object. Okay, so any type of object we're going to include as a set of curly braces. Okay, and then in JSON, we're going to have key value pairs separated by a colon. And the syntax that I used here was pretty specific. So I put quotes around the key. So our keys are going to be strings. and then we have colon, and then the corresponding value for that key. So for instance, let's say our key was first name. Our key could be first name, and we'd have first name in quotes. So here's an example. We'd have first name in quotes, and then colon, our name. Okay, and you'll notice that I included name in parentheses because really what we have on this right-hand side of the colon is some JavaScript value. And that JavaScript value can be literally any JavaScript value. It could be a function, it could be a string, it could be a number, it could be an object, it could be a collection. So it literally can be anything on the right-hand side, and that's going to determine whether we need quotes or not. So we need quotes around strings, but we really don't need quotes around anything else. So we're just going to have the value on the right-hand side. So key value pairs. And then our comma is going to be our separator character. Okay, so if we have to separate key value pairs, so for instance an object has multiple key value pairs to represent their different attributes, we can do that. Okay, so these are the 4 basic syntax rules that I care about with JSON. And then what I want to do now is I want to go through a couple of examples with you so you can get the feel for how this JSON syntax is going to lay out. Okay, so if I decide I want to have a collection, so I say here's all of the numbers, and I'm going to create a list of numbers, so 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I can have a collection. Okay, so that's a pretty basic example of me using a collection. And we'll build up and have some different examples here. So this is kind of a basic example of a collection. We could also have another collection of names. So we could say Bill and Sue and Mary and Dave and Tom and Ed. Okay, so we can have a collection of names. So those are fairly straightforward examples of me using JSON to represent a collection. Okay, now let's get into the second example where we're dealing with an object. Okay, and this is gonna bleed into the third key value pair syntax example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want to have a person, and a person is going to be equal to an instance of an object. Okay, right now that person is an object, but it has no attributes, it has no functionality or anything like that. So what we want to do is we want to give that object state. We want to have some attributes like what is the person's name, what is the person's email address. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's have a key value pair. So first name is going to be Bill. Last name will be Gates. And then email will be bgates@hotmail.com. Okay, and what we have is all of our key value pairs are strings. Okay, so first name, last name, email. They're colon separated, the key value pairs. And then as our separator, we're using the comma. So right now we have a person whose first name is Bill, last name is Gates, and email is bgates@hotmail.com. Okay, so this is an example of me creating an object that has state. It has 3 different attributes, and those attributes have values. Okay. If we want, we could add another attribute. So just to kind of clarify the point, we could say Bill Gates has an age of 65. And you'll notice that that age attribute is not in quotes because I want it treated as a number. Okay, so it's a little bit different than the other attributes because the other attribute values were strings. In this case, the value of that age attribute is a number, so I'm not putting it in quotes. Okay. So we have collections and we have objects, and the same rules essentially apply as what we were talking about above, these JSON syntax rules. Let's talk about how do I access this stuff. Okay, so objects are fairly straightforward, collections are fairly straightforward, but I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. If I want to access the person attribute, so let's say I just wanted to print out the full name, so I'm going to do a console.log, and I'm going to use backtick so I can have a template, and I'm going to say that the first name attribute is equal to some value, and it's going to be person.firstname, and then I'll have a new line character, and then the last name attribute, colon, and then I'll have a placeholder for the person.last name. And I'll interpolate those values because I'm using a string template. Okay, so now if I refresh this, you'll notice that I get the first name is Bill, last name is Gates, and I'm accessing those person object attributes using dot notation. One interesting feature with this is, and this goes back to objects and the way objects and collections are represented in JavaScript, I don't have to use dot notation. So I'm going to show you an alternative syntax. I can use square bracket notation. So now I'm using square bracket notation. You'll notice that I still get the same result. The preference is that I'd use dot notation, but I certainly can use the square bracket notation. And I'm going to leave both in this example, okay, to show you that you have the choice. Let's assume that I wanted to output the names. As we go further in the course, there's going to be alternative ways to do this, but for now I'm just going to have a simple for loop. So for let I equal to 0, I less than names.length, I plus plus, and then I want to do a console.log of names at index I. And really, names at index I is one of these strings. Okay, so if I come back over, you'll see that I get all of my names out of my collection. Okay, so I have access to all of that data, whether I'm talking about a collection or an object. Okay, where this gets more interesting is, let's say I have a collection of cities. Okay, so I want a collection of cities, and each city is going to have a couple of attributes. So namely, the city is going to have a name and a population. Okay, and I'm just going to guess population, so they're going to be way off, so it's no big deal. But I want to go ahead and have a variable called cities, and it's a collection. Okay, so I'm indicating that I have a collection. I have multiple cities. I'm indicating that by using the square bracket notation. But each city that I want in this collection is a complex object. It's both the name and a corresponding population. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to set up a couple of cities, and they're going to be objects. So you'll notice the syntax that I'm using is that I have a collection, and embedded within the collection are 3 objects. Okay, and that's indicated by the curly brace notation. Okay, each one of these objects is going to have 2 key value pairs, one being the name and then the second being the population. So I'm going to use name, and let's use New York. And then the second attribute is going to be the population. So the population of New York City, I'm going to put at, 12 million. 12.5 million. Okay, and then I want to have another city. So I'm just using the name as my key. My corresponding city will be San Diego with a population of, let's say, 3.4 million. And then my third city will be Madison, Wisconsin, and we'll go with a population of 255,000. Okay, random estimates for population. But I have 3 cities, and each city is going to have both a name and a population. And like I said, I want to be able to access this data. So I know the JSON rules. I know that I have a collection. I know that I have a collection of objects. I'm going to access the attributes of my objects using dot notation. So I want to create a for loop to access those cities and output the name and the population for each city. Okay, so I'm going to have a for loop. Let I equal to 0, I less than cities.length, I plus plus, and I want to do a console.log of the city, and I'll use, and I don't want double quotes, I want the backtick notation, so I want the city, so cities, at index I dot name to grab that first city, the new line, and the population. Cities at index I dot population. And if I've done this correctly, I should see all of my cities. So you'll see I have the city New York, I have the city San Diego, the city of Madison, with their corresponding populations. Okay. This is just kind of a basic example of what JSON looks like. The JSON syntax that we're going to use throughout the class is going to get more and more complicated, so I don't want you to think that this is kind of the end-all be-all, but these rules govern all of JSON. And what I mean by that is we might have additional information about each city. For instance, we might have districts within cities. We might have mayors and staff of mayors that might be a collection of people. So these can get really complicated. These objects are not just objects that have basic data types on the right-hand side for their key value pairs. On the right-hand side of the key value pairs, I could have another collection. I could have a complex object. I could have a less complicated thing on the right-hand side, like a string or a number, but I don't want you to think that I can't embed complex data into my JSON objects. Okay, so these are just basic examples kind of illustrating the basic JSON syntax rules that we're going to have to adhere to when we're dealing with JavaScript.